Hello, good evening. In preparation to write this piece, I sent Marius a bunch of pictures of Lisbon. And so I found myself going through the images a few Portuguese photographers took of the city sometime around the 1950s, when my country was still a fascist country, and its slogan in foreign affairs was, "We proudly stand alone." The motto whose practicality remains, let's face it, in retrospective, far more than arguable, attending to the fact that we are a tiny nation of 10 million, roughly the size of London, surrounded by the Atlantic all the way through the length of its western border and confining with Spain inland. Proudly standing alone. What the fuck? What were the fascists thinking? So I found myself wondering how, in light of these old photographs, I have myself clung to the idea of Lisbon with a kind of grief which is a form of stubbornness. The function of this grief being not letting go of Lisbon. I feel jealous of everyone who gets to live in Lisbon. I feel jealous of people who attend meetings, conferences, and other events for professional purposes in Lisbon and then feel entitled to come back around and tell me all about it, as if this supposes some sort of connection between us. I feel so jealous of Lisbon that if I could set up a referendum to cut any other person's access to my city, I would do it, and then I would enforce the ruling of this referendum regardless of its consequences for the economy, development, and foreign affairs. The last time I was in Lisbon, I realized that I look at everything with the unkind habits a soldier on leave would cultivate. A soldier whose work has changed him, who is now the foreigner in his own house, and who can't help but feeling robbed of it and cheated by it. The nature of his love, suspicious to the eyes of others because of the secrets he carries, because of the mysterious hiatus in which he was gone.
The city and the city. This is what I remembered looking at the pictures of Vilnius and Lisbon, the novel by China Mieville, about two cities coexisting in the same place at the same time and trying not to notice each other, to unsee. But there are more of them. The real city, the city of memories, and the city you've never been to, but always wanted to visit. They can't coexist. You are an eternal traveler between them, a passenger, and you ride and you ride and you ride from the city's backside. You see the stars come out of the sky. I live in Vilnius, the city of ghosts, the city with a black hole in its memory, the black hole the size of 60,000 Jews. It used to be the Jerusalem of the North. Now it's a ghost town and we're all new here, walking through the streets of our new old city, walking among our old new and ugly Soviet apartment blocks, walking in the shadows of our oh-so-new skyscrapers, listening to the train's whistle, smelling lilacs blooming in the courtyards, seeing old peeling letters in the ghetto, touching a warm pebble left on a tombstone, struggling to remember. I live in Vilnius. Photography is our censored memory, gaps of light in the fence of amnesiac darkness. You get a glimpse of people in weird clothes and weird poses. We are blank slates to you, as imagined as a tree in a poem or a character in a novel. I live in Vilnius. Books are our censored memory, books molding in dark corners, books hidden for decades and centuries, written in languages we no longer know, books and poems. And Lisbon. What do you know about Lisbon? One poet and her longing, bits of history, the usual tourist crap. Their past and lives are dark to me, only that longing seems familiar.
Say that we can decide when the nature of a place is to creep into us, or that we are allowed to return to certain places in a state of deep plunge, like diving into the sea from a certain height. Say that we allow for certain places to set on the surface of our bodies, like skin turns brown in the sun or dehydrates in the cold, its pull and grip like an image beyond repair, like the scar tissue that grows around a broken bone. Say that these are the images, the arcades of Lisbon, main squares being paced up and down by men in dark suits, women dressed in old-fashioned dresses, an old-fashioned country, parochial, frozen in time. As we all know, old photographs, and not just films, need sometimes to be sent to archives, where craftsmen are busy every day working against the mortality of images, and that even the most unforgivable images are necessary. Of them, what stays with us is an ultimate lesson in everyday distraction. There are also all the images we are yet to hear about. For instance, one of the photographs Marius sent me was taken in the 1960s. It's titled Everyday Vilnius. It was taken on a rooftop. It shows two figures lying with their backs to the camera on the top of another roof a little further ahead. There is, at the point of saturation, a kind of objective detachment in certain amazing images, which is a consequence of perspective. Someone I once loved stood behind the camera and photographed the destruction of a garden in Lisbon. I later received an envelope that contained all these images, and among them there's my friend, the photographer, standing in front of the camera like a shooter, sitting in the gravel. He is dressed in black. His clothes are stained with dust. His tall body against the remnants of a fountain with a statue of a half-broken general, a glorious ruin on top of a decapitated horse, also missing a limb. You see, I knew this city is something Marius wrote when we were both put up to this by Stephen.
I knew the city from dust, bitter and fine, from trolleybus crackle, from light, restless, filtered through lindens and clouds. I knew the city workdays. I lived near the slaughterhouse. Fuel oil floated down the river nearby, smell of blood and carrion on the wind. I knew the city's Sundays, empty and warm as the inside of a church bell. Photographs are our censored memory, images of lies in a fence of amnesiac darkness. Those photos I sent Tatiana of beautiful serene Vilnius in the 60s and 70s, they are all lies as I think about it. It was most hopeless Soviet times, no light at the end of the tunnel. I see here photos of Lisbon, soldiers on the streets, kids, an atmosphere of restless but hope waiting. Is it their carnation revolution, their peaceful coup? Red carnations reminds me only of childhood in communist Vilnius. Statues of bloody Russian revolution leaders, all those bloody rituals of speeches, marches and flowers. Such differences. Revolution gone right, revolution gone wrong. But we have something in common. Decency, quiet pride, two cities where life started anew. Well, you can call it wishful thinking. I call it hope. You see, the nature of the place creeps on us is something Tatiana wrote when we were both put up to this by Stephen.